1,000 shares of Palantir right now would cost you $16,300 or £12,650.43p. But how much could those 1,000 shares be worth in just 7 years in 2030? In a recent video, which I'll link somewhere up here, I spoke about 4 different price predictions for Palantir stock by 2030. These included a $40 per share by 2030 price prediction as our bearish case. Then we had a $60 per share as our expected case, $100 per share as our bullish case. And then for fun, we threw in a super bullish case of $300 per share for Palantir stock by 2030. Now, these price predictions weren't necessarily my personal price predictions for the stock. Of course, this video is just for a little bit of fun. No one truly knows what's going to happen to a stock even tomorrow, let alone in 7 years' time. But for example, the bearish case of $40 per share came from the all-time high of Palantir being $39 per share in January 2021. So I felt it was pretty bearish to say that they would go on and reach their all-time high again in 7 years from now. Then for our expected price of $60 per share, this would be just under a 270% increase from the current price of $16.30 that the stock's at now, or about a 38% increase per year on average. This price of $60 per share by 2030 was a collection of different price targets that I found online, and I basically just looked at all of those and then took an average. Again, with our bullish price prediction of $100 per share, this has come from an accumulation of different online sources. Now, I did see some online sources that put Palantir at $500 per share by 2030, but I think there's just too many things that we don't know. There's too many dependents that are unknown at this point for me to stick that sort of figure in this video. But of course, even our bullish case of $100 and $300 for our super bullish may still be quite out there. We don't really know what's going to happen, or we'll look back in 2030 and think that we should have been setting ourselves higher targets. We just don't know. Our super bullish price prediction for Palantir of $300 per share by 2030 was added for a little bit of fun. But also, no one can really say with confidence that this couldn't happen, because 2030 is just too far out for us to actually make accurate predictions. And we have seen particular growth stocks in the past achieve this sort of exponential growth that Palantir would need to see in order to reach that $300 per share in 2030. So it's not completely off limits. It's also worth remembering that stock splits can happen if the price rises too high too quickly. And then this will make the investment more accessible to more people. And of course, it would also increase liquidity. There would be different criteria that Palantir would need to reach in order for these different price predictions to happen. Of course, for the higher price predictions to happen, we would need to see them do more. And for the lower price predictions, obviously less. So to hit $40 per share by 2030, which was of course our bearish case, Palantir wouldn't really need to do anything too crazy. They would just need to continue getting more of their commercial contracts, have some good earnings reports, and the eventual inclusion into the S&P 500 index. And maybe for this as well, they don't get that NHS contract that we're all waiting to hear about. And maybe they fall short on some of the other catalysts too, but they're still growing slowly and getting a few more commercial contracts, and they're renewing current contracts. Now, for the expected price of $60 per share, we would need to see more contracts on both the commercial side of the business and on the government side of Palantir's business. And we would expect to see increase in revenue and increase in growth again from both sides of the business. Also, they would be retaining their contracts. Palantir is of course a sticky business. This means they have a very, very high customer retention rate. Palantir is pretty expensive. So this could be a prohibitive factor for some companies not actually being able to sign on. And this may leave Palantir just available for the largest companies that can afford them. So there is potential that this pricing could limit their reach in the short term. We would see more quarters of growing profitability and good earnings, and the inclusion into the S&P 500 index, which, if you didn't know, will bring in institutional money and institutional ownership. For our bullish case, we would expect to see all of the above, everything we've just spoken about, but also we'd expect to see them have success in guaranteeing that NHS contract, because that will open them up to not only more European companies, but also more healthcare companies as well. And they are already doing extremely well in the healthcare sector. Aside from this, we would also expect to see them getting massive contracts with big names. So perhaps they would start working with companies like Tesla, which would be super exciting for me as a Palantir and Tesla investor. And also we would expect to see further integration into both Microsoft and Amazon. For our bullish case, we would need to see Palantir continue to expand on a global level. They already have a relatively diversified customer base outside of the US, and they do actually earn a substantial percentage of their revenue from customers outside of the USA. But we would want to see this taken up another notch. You have to think about what other growth companies had to do in the past to reach the growth that they saw. So just taking Tesla as an example, I know now in the UK that Teslas are so popular and they're growing in popularity. I walk out my house and any given day I'll probably see at least one Tesla, whereas this wasn't the case just even 5 years ago. So this is the same with Palantir. We kind of need to see both commercial and government organizations across the world being willing to work with them. Of course, with a company like Palantir and with software like Palantir Give, they are going to restrict who they actually work with, which I think says a lot about what the software is actually able to do for a business or a government organization. So again, this will limit growth slightly, but probably for the better. They would be releasing new products and also updates and upgrades to existing software as well. Basically, they would make their offerings even more irresistible to potential clients. We already saw this when they released AIP, Artificial Intelligence Platform, and we had the AIP Conde. Just that alone has made Palantir way more attractive to many companies out there. So we would want to see this continue in the future. Ideally, we would want to see them sustaining a 30% or higher compound annual growth for the next 7 years leading up to 2030. And outside of their control, we would kind of want the macroeconomic situation to be somewhat decent for them. So relatively low interest rates, and also with a company like Palantir, we would kind of need the political environment to align as well. And then we have our super bullish case of $300 per share, which for some people may seem absolutely crazy. So if this seems unrealistic to you, let me know in the comments below. But if you're a Palantir bull and this doesn't even seem high enough, again, let me know in the comments below. So for this one to actually happen, we would need everything we've already discussed to take place. But also we would need the stars to align perfectly to give us the most favorable macroeconomic conditions. And also we would expect maybe to see more of that AI hype that we've already been seeing this year so far to continue, and Palantir specifically to really benefit from that. We would see amazing results from all of those Palantir partnerships that have been announced recently, and this would further increase the commercial competition, meaning that more companies would want to either get on board with Palantir or would want to renew their current contracts so they don't actually lose access to Palantir's software. They would surpass all targets and expectations that the Wall Street analysts have for this stock by far, and they would also completely dominate the market share in many different sectors. So clearly, just by talking about what would need to happen for each of these price predictions to occur, there are so many different catalysts. Ones that we kind of can predict coming up, like the S&P 500 inclusion, like good earnings reports, stuff like that. But also there are so many catalysts that will appear that we don't even know about yet, so we can't even begin to factor those into this model. Right, so with that said, let's see exactly how much 1,000 shares of Palantir would be worth in 2030 according to these 4 different price predictions. So one share of Palantir right now comes in at $16.30. Of course, when you're seeing this video, it would have changed slightly, so you can just plug the new numbers in, but it gives you an idea anyway. This means if you were to do a lump sum investing strategy and purchase all 1,000 shares of Palantir right now, today, you would pay $16,300. So let's just have a look at this table that I made. So for $40 per share, that price prediction to happen in 2030, which is our bearish case, that of course would cost you $16,300. They all would, because you're paying today's price. But 1,000 shares in 2030, if our bearish case were to come true, they would then be worth $40,000. Which is a percentage increase of just over 145%, which works out to be nearly 21% increase on average per year. Then for our expected case of $60 per share, again, $16,300, they would then be worth $60,000 in 2030, which equates to a 268% increase over them 7 years, or about 38% increase per year. Our bullish case of $100 per share could be worth $100,000 for those 1,000 shares in 2030, which is a 513.5% increase, or a 73.4% increase averaged out per year. And then for our super bullish case, those 1,000 shares, if the super bullish case happens, would be worth $300,000 in 2030. So that is a big profit made in just 7 years, $16,300 to $300,000. Quite a big difference there. Percentage increase is here over those 7 years, and averaged out per year is this figure here. This is somewhat simplified because I'm not taking into account any investment costs, because they just vary so much from platform to platform to country. There's different taxes, there's different costs when you actually purchase the investment. So I've just left that out purely for simplicity. For our bearish case, we said that Palantir stock would have to increase by about 20.7% on average per year for the next 7 years, which seems quite crazy given that the S&P 500's average annual return is only 10%. So it's more than double that. But if you look at the data, and there's not much data for Palantir because it's a relatively new public stock, Palantir has averaged about 20% per year so far. So it is very possible. And just this year so far, which may be a little bit of an anomaly, they have gone up by about 155% already. So it really depends on the growth of this stock in its early years, which is a very exciting time to be an investor, but also a very nerve-wracking time, because your portfolio is just constantly going up and down, which you expect to see with growth stocks anyway, but especially for those early year growth stocks that have not even reached a point near maturation yet. And with Palantir's lack of previous data, because like I said, they're a newly public company, it's hard to really look back and make sense of any past data and growth, but even so, past performance doesn't indicate future performance anyway. If you want to get notified every time I buy or sell any positions in my own investment portfolio, and you want to come and chat about Palantir, Tesla, all different stocks and investment strategies, then consider joining the Patreon. You'll get access to the Discord through that. I'll leave a link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you shortly in another video.